wasn't willing to take no type of disrespect from no one of no caliber, of no race, of no age, of no kind.
I rob pun without a gun, then just peace and run. This nigga be 400 pounds, I ain't gon' catch me, son.
Gotta rob if I have to. I'll blast you. Tell the devil it was fun if he asks you.
It all started with a diss and nearly ended in blood.
One thing you did, what everybody was freaked out by, was the track How to Rob. Yeah. You still got problems with that today?
In the summer of '99, the hip-hop world was caught off guard by a wild, reckless, and genius song called How to Rob. A then-unknown 50 Cent kicked open the door to fame with a lyrical heist, mugging every rap superstar in the game, with nothing but wit, hunger, and a twisted grin.
My record don't sell, I'm a rob and steal. You better recognize, I'm straight from the street.
But there was one name on that list he shouldn't have touched.
Pun said, in 5 seconds, he's coming out of that balcony. In 5 seconds, this dude came flying out the balcony.
See, Pun didn't laugh. He didn't call into Hot 97 for a clever clapback. He went straight for the kill. And those close to the situation say if Pun hadn't passed away months later, New York City would have seen something worse than the East Coast-West Coast War. This would have been a civil war inside the 5 boroughs, because this wasn't just music. This was Queens versus the Bronx, G-Unit versus Terror Squad.
Terror Squad, the mode that we was on, you know, because we was rolling with the street dudes and we come from that.
But how did things get so violent? Let's talk about it. Released on August 10th, 1999, How to Rob was less of a song and more of a Molotov cocktail, tossed right into the center of hip-hop's elite circle. Jay-Z, Missy Elliott, DMX, Slick Rick, Will Smith, and even his wife Jada. Nobody was safe.
He dissed P. Diddy, Bobby Brown, Whitney Houston, Wu-Tang Clan, Jay-Z, Stevie J, Big Pun, Master P, Will Smith, and Jada Pinkett. Corrupt, Foxy Brown, Jermaine Dupri, DMX, Sticky Fingers, R. Kelly, Mike Tyson, Busta Rhymes, and I'm actually not even naming all of them.
50 wasn't throwing shade. He was tossing grenades. And it was all done in a format inspired by Biggie's Dreams track. Except Biggie was fantasizing about R&B divas. 50 was fantasizing about robbing rap royalty with reckless abandon. And yet the chorus tried to cool things off. This Ain't Serious, sung playfully by D-Dot, aka the Mad Rapper.
The Mad Rapper.
The Mad Rapper was on there. And the Mad Rapper was on Biggie album, right?
Right.
And it was some joke, right?
It was some joke. I took it as a joke.
But not everyone was laughing, especially not Big Pun.
Pun, yeah, he was mad. Felt that was disrespect. Ready to get him for it.
Why did he find that disrespectful? Because Pun is like...
We wouldn't treat nobody disrespect us. That's it. We who we are, we don't tolerate my...
Now Pun was no stranger to lyrical warfare. He was a titan, both lyrically and literally, in a scene where punchlines doubled as pressure points. So when 50 Cent rapped,
I rob pun without a gun, then just peace and run. This nigga weigh 400 pounds, I ain't gon' catch me, son.
the joke didn't land. It hit hard. Insults are nothing new in rap. In fact, they're part of the sport. But 50's line struck a nerve deeper than most because it wasn't just a bar. It was a shot at Pun's health, his image, his humanity. And to Pun, that wasn't a battle rap. That was disrespect. But for 50 Cent, this was only a strategy. And it worked.
I mean, he figured out his marketing plan. And it worked. How to Rob was a classic.
Within days, he was the most talked about name in New York. DJs were spinning How to Rob on repeat. Labels scrambled to figure out if he was serious or just. Artists were checking their phones, and side-eyes were being thrown at every industry party, because suddenly everyone was fair game. What if he disses me next? And that was the genius. 50 weaponized paranoia and turned it into marketing. He didn't just get attention, he forced it. And the public couldn't get enough, because he wasn't just coming for their favorite rappers. He was doing it with jokes.
So I'm like, I gotta make a record that makes everybody stop right now and say, who's this guy 50 Cent? Right now, who is this guy, you know?
But Pun wasn't a walking punchline or a flashy chain to make fun of. He was respected. He was a Bronx kingpin with lyrical venom and real street ties. Terror Squad wasn't built on shiny suits and Billboard hits. They were built on sweat, pain, and fear. And in their world, disrespect wasn't a joke. It was a challenge. Tony Sunshine, Pun's close friend and a member of Terror Squad, spoke years later about the reality behind that bar, and he didn't mince words. The beef was real. There were no studio threats or Twitter fingers back then. If you called out Pun, you were calling out the entire block.
We wasn't willing to take no type of disrespect from no one of no caliber, of no race, of no age, of no kind.
Behind the scenes, the reaction was swift. There were no public Twitter feuds. This was 1999. If you had beef, you handled it up close and personal, and word on the street was Pun wanted to handle it. Cuban Link would later admit Pun was tight about the song. Fat Joe confirmed it too, even recalling Pun fuming in a van, furious at the idea of being mocked for something he struggled with in private. See, this wasn't about clout chasing. For Pun, it was principle. We don't make songs about rappers we don't like. Tony Sunshine later said, if we going to make a song, it's going to be about how we beat your.
If we're gonna make a song about you, it's gonna be how we beat you. Featuring Tony Sunshine.
You could laugh at a line on the radio. You could even quote it. But if you were on the wrong side of Pun's respect, it wasn't going to be funny when you crossed paths. According to Cuban Link, Pun even wanted to confront 50, not in a rap battle, not on wax, in person, face to face. Because in Pun's world, rap wasn't theater, it was real life. D. Dot, the mad rapper himself, later admitted the line might have gone too far. It was a little insensitive, he said in 2019, reflecting on Pun's health struggles. He'd seen Pun gasping for air in the studio.
Nobody likes to be mentioned in a bad light. Nobody. But you know, I came saying, hey, listen, come on, man. Like, you know, I'm not gonna ruin my career for this record right here.
He knew it wasn't just a funny line. It was a jab at someone fighting just to breathe. But 50 didn't flinch. Years later, in Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter, he made it clear How to Rob was his Trojan horse. If none of y'all want to be my friend, then we're all gonna be enemies, he wrote. I didn't have a problem with most of the artists I mentioned, but being respectful wasn't going to put me in the position I needed to be in.
It led back to How to Rob. I'm like, it doesn't matter to me, if anyone's upset.
That was the game. Shake the table. Force them to look your way, even if it meant catching a few fists on the climb up. Still, behind the bars and bravado, there was something darker simmering. Because 6 months after the record dropped, Big Pun passed. It was in February of 2000 and he passed from heart failure, never getting the chance to fully respond in the way he wanted.
Pun was my man. Toured all over with him. That was family, man. I was heartbroken when we lost Pun. That was my man.
But before he left, he had his say. On his posthumous album, Yeah Baby, Pun delivered a warning disguised as a bar.
To the 50 Cent rapper, very funny, get your nut off, because in real life, you don't know I'll blow your motherfucking head off.
That wasn't a diss, that was a threat. So maybe it was serious after all, because in New York, where words can kill and reputations are life or death, How to Rob wasn't just a stunt, it was a line in the sand. And Pun, he saw it clear as day. Why this could have split New York in half. It's easy to look back and think the 50 Cent versus Big Pun situation was nothing more than a clash of personalities, egos, or lyrical styles. But if you dig beneath the bars, you'll find that it wasn't just rap beef. This was New York beef. And that's a different animal entirely. You see, in the late 90s and early 2000s, the 5 boroughs were separate kingdoms, and the Bronx and Queens were 2 empires with their own armies, codes, and generals. Big Pun was the face of the Bronx, no question. He had the weight of Terror Squad behind him. Fat Joe, Cuban Link, Armageddon, Prospect, and more. These weren't just rappers. They were men with real street affiliations, ties going back to Soundview, Castle Hill, and every other corner of the BX where the boom bap beat masked the sound of sirens.
One by one, he Pun is doing this, pointing at everybody in the room. There's about 20 people in the house. He pointing at each one of them one by one. Yo, show P your gun. Yo, show P your gun. Show P your gun. That's mad gun.
Now 50 Cent wasn't just coming out of South Jamaica, Queens. His name rang bells from Baisley Projects to Linden. G-Unit wasn't a rap crew at first, it was a militant extension of the streets. Before the record deals, they were known for survival, for presence, for a kind of rawness that didn't come with a marketing plan.
When you're in my situation, there's no plan B. It's music or we sell crack. Because that's what we did before we did music.
And when 50 fired that lyrical shot at Pun and Joe on How to Rob, lots of fans thought he was sending a message. Pun responded with Whatcha Gonna Do, a record soaked in warning shots and grave threats masked as punchlines. The track wasn't just a musical answer, it was a Bronx war cry. The energy was electric, like you could smell the gunpowder in the subtext. So why could this have split New York in half? Because everything was already hanging by a thread. Only a few years earlier, Biggie was gone, Pac was gone, The East Coast-West Coast War had exposed how deep rap rivalries could cut, how quickly bars turned to blood.
From the hood, so I'm thinking like, this might not end up well. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we going back and forth, we doing this records, we gotta go to LA.
The streets of New York were on edge, wounded and waiting. Crews were paranoid. Labels were picking sides. You were either bad boy or you weren't. Death row or you weren't. That atmosphere didn't disappear overnight. It simply went underground, transferred into borough rivalries. So when Pun and 50 started lobbing shots, it wasn't just entertainment. It was a possible reignition. And this time, there wasn't a coast separating them. You had Terror Squad with the Latin Kings in their corner, and G-Unit with deep ties to hustlers and shooters from Queens and Brooklyn. Former alliances could have crumbled. Diplomatic relationships in hip-hop, already strained, might have shattered entirely. The city was primed for war. The Bronx, long seen as the birthplace of hip-hop, wouldn't have taken kindly to a Queens cat disrespecting its crowned prince. Meanwhile, Southside Queens wasn't about to let anyone bully their rising sun. What's wild is that the industry seemed to know how dangerous this could get. Insiders have admitted over the years that there was real fear behind the scenes, not just because of what Pun might have said next, but because of who Pun was. He wasn't just lyrical, he was loved, a heavyweight in every sense of the word. If Pun had lived, many believe he would have crushed 50's rise before Get Rich or Die Tryin' ever had the chance to dominate the airwaves.
That's why I'm always fighting for New York, because when we out of town, we New York out of town.
Some say Pun would have doubled down, pulled out mixtapes, freestyles, whatever it took, and made it a point to humiliate 50 before he gained momentum. And he wouldn't have been alone. Cuban Link, who's never been shy about his disdain for 50, has hinted in interviews that their crew was ready to respond if things escalated. They were just waiting for Pun to call the shot. Others believe the opposite, that Pun's staying power would have forced 50 to level up earlier, to sharpen his pen and armor himself with better bars instead of bullets. In this alternate timeline, maybe the beef turns into a battle for lyrical dominance, a clash for the title of New York's hardest. Either way, insiders agree on one thing. If Pun had stayed alive, everything would have been different.
He could know it, just didn't like it. Hey, what you to talk about, man? You using me? You, I'm gonna beat the out of you. That's how we handle shit in the street.
Joe even admitted years later that Pun was a super general, not just a rapper, but a leader. He had the ear of the streets and the respect of industry vets. People followed Pun. So if he had decided to take this beef to the next level, it's likely the whole city would have followed him into the fire. And given how fragile New York's hip-hop scene was at the time, that kind of fracture could have turned the birthplace of rap into a war zone. Instead, fate intervened. Pun passed in 2000 just as the pot was boiling. The match was dropped, but the fire never lit. And when 50 exploded in 2003, Terror Squad was in a different space. Joe was pivoting. Cuban was on the outs. The moment had passed. But still, you listen to those early tracks, hear the venom in Pun's delivery, the pride in his burrow, the heat in 50's rebuttals, and you realize this wasn't just rap beef. This was a Bronx versus Queens standoff that could have redrawn the map of New York hip-hop forever. Because Big Pun doesn't play. We can take a look at DJ Whoo Kid, for example, who learned firsthand what it meant to get on Pun's bad side. Sauce Money broke the story years later, his voice laced with disbelief even after all that time had passed. It was the early 2000s, and DJ Whoo Kid had thrown Sauce's Middle Finger You on a mixtape.
Weeks before, there was a diss record that Sauce Money put out, because I think Jay-Z and Pun had beef in the club, and I think they hit Jay-Z with a bottle, and Jay-Z was sleeping, whatever, in the back. So Jay-Z never responded, but Sauce Money responded.
In the track, Sauce calls himself the fattest, nicest. That one bar was enough to make Big Pun think the record was about him.
I put out a record called Middle Finger You, the title track, and you know, for some strange reason, he thought I was talking about him.
Now mind you, Sauce didn't even know Pun. They'd never met. He wasn't aiming at him, but Pun wasn't trying to hear it. That wasn't his style. This wasn't about talking it out or trading bars. Pun allegedly arranged for Whoo Kid to be booked for a fake show. When the DJ arrived, a van rolled up. They grabbed him, tossed him inside. Pun was already there, waiting, strapped with a gun and a death stare that could cut through concrete. According to the story, he threatened to kill Whoo Kid right then and there for promoting a track that, at least in his mind, was disrespectful.
They grab him, pull him into a van.
Yeah, basically.
And Big Pun is in the van with a gun. basically threatening to kill DJ Who Kid over putting that record.
They eventually let Woo Kid go. No shots fired, no punches thrown, but the message was clear. Don't play with Big Pun's name, ever. So when 50 Cent dropped How to Rob and name-dropped Big Pun, it wasn't funny to everyone. Pun didn't want a verse, he wanted a van. The scary part wasn't just the anger, it was how organized Pun could be about it. He wasn't just yelling into a mic, he was plotting, lining up who to call, figuring out where someone would be. That's what made the tension with 50 so dangerous, because Pun knew the streets, and he had people who would ride without asking questions. Even some of his close friends admitted it later. Pun had that duality. He could be cracking jokes one minute and flipping a table the next. It wasn't a persona, it wasn't for clout, it was who he was. A man who'd come up from nothing and was willing to protect his legacy with everything he had. Freestyles and interviews from that era show that even other rappers treaded lightly. Nobody wanted to be on Pun's radar in the wrong way. If he mentioned you on a record, you better hope it was praise. If not, well, DJ Woo Kid could tell you exactly what came next. In one of Pun's raw freestyles, you can hear the venom in his voice when he talks about people who cross him. It wasn't punchlines, it was warning shots. Don't make me have to call your name out, he spat once, unrecorded off the dome. You won't leave the club the same way you came out. The crew around him would just nod, because they knew it was prophecy. And Pun had that aura, the kind that makes people check their tone before speaking. Even Fat Joe admitted years later that Pun had an energy about him. Unpredictable, but not without reason. He wasn't out there trying to make enemies. But when he thought you were one, he'd come at you with everything. Long before the fame, Pun, also Christopher Rios, had been obsessed with language. He didn't just rap, he dissected syllables, twisted metaphors, bent consonants like gravity didn't apply. He was the kind of student of the game who inhaled dictionaries and exhaled battle rhymes, and he never wrote to be liked. He wrote to dominate. By the time he rechristened himself Big Punisher, shortened to Big Pun, he'd already formed Full Eclipse with Cuban Link and Triple Size. But that Bronx energy was too raw, too combustible for local circuits. Pun needed a bigger crew, a louder mic, and that's how the Terror Squad came about. Joe brought him in, but Pun was never just a member. He was the engine. Still, the rise wasn't clean. Pun was juggling hunger and hardship. He'd left home at 15, bounced through the streets, lost in a cycle of poverty, pressure, and pain. Married young. He had 3 kids and no safety net, only bars, and a weight that kept rising along with his pen game. He was big before the fame. Not just in size, but in voice, in ambition, in presence. When he walked into a room, it bent around him. And when he rapped, you listened like your life depended on it. The late 90s New York rap scene was still twitching from the trauma of Biggie's assassination. Pac had barely been buried. Smoke still lingered. So when Pun dropped onto the scene, he was stepping into a vacuum, one left by the 2 biggest titans the culture had ever seen.
Pun is a legend, rest in peace. His son is fire, like, he's fire. Like,
the streets called him a beast because his pen didn't miss. The rhyme schemes were layered like trapdoors, multi-syllables, internal rhymes, alliteration, breathless flows, and tongue twisters that other MCs wouldn't even attempt. His lyrical reputation built fast. One feature here, another freestyle there. Off the books, you ain't a killer. Buzz became momentum. Then, Still Not a Player in '98 came as a street anthem dressed in radio polish. Irresistible hook, killer verses. The city lit up, the Bronx roared. Suddenly, Big Pun was a star.
If he was still around right now, we'd be looking at him like he's one of the greatest of all time, because I think he's one of the greatest of all time.
But the streets knew. Pun's genius came with shadows. He carried trauma like he carried syllables, all at once. There were whispers about violence, rage, dark moods. His crew loved him, but even they knew. Pun was a storm. Cuban Link once said Pun wrote most of the Terror Squad album. Jilly swore Pun even ghost wrote parts of Fat Joe's Don Cartagena. Joe denied it, but what's undeniable is Pun's fingerprints were everywhere. Outside the booth, though, the picture got blurrier. The pressure was mounting. The fame was weighty. So was his body. He struggled with health, struggled with demons. Everyone knew not to cross him. Though his beef with 50 Cent didn't blow up because of his untimely death, the momentum How to Rob generated still came with a cost. Columbia, nervous about how deep 50 had gone, shelved his debut album. Then 50 was shot 9 times in front of his grandmother's house.
I forget, why did the guy shoot you 9 times? Was it drugs or something?
He was paid to do it.
The industry moved on. For a moment, it looked like the gamble hadn't paid off. But 50 survived, and eventually he thrived. He flipped the industry again with Get Rich or Die Tryin'. becoming one of the biggest artists of the 2000s. But if you trace it all back, if you really follow the trail, it starts with How to Rob, that one song that was a declaration of war.